Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Bass Fishing for Noobs here on the Paddle and Fin podcast. I'm your host, Sean. My co-host, Susie, is taking tonight off again. She should be back next week, so looking forward to having her back on. But I just wanted to tell you guys I'm super happy. We're getting the Noobs tournament for March fired up. That should be it's live on TourneyX right now. By the time this show airs, we will be in the thick of March and well, actually the very beginning of March, but the tournament will be on its way then. So hopefully you guys will get signed up. We have a few people signed up now. The more the merrier. So make sure you guys go out and check that out on TourneyX. If you want to get, if you miss the March one, we're going to have them every month from now, probably till October. So don't feel bad if you missed the first one. We'll have plenty of opportunities for you guys to sign up and kind of compete there. But all that being said, I'm super excited about tonight's guest. Way back in July of 2020 is the last time he was on the show. Ryan was still here doing the new show with me, and I feel like the whole world has changed since the last time he was on. So I reached out to him and asked if he would be kind enough to come back on and join the new show again, and we can catch up with him. But I figured he actually gave me a really cool video. So I figured rather than me try to mince words and get that all right, I'd let the video do the talking for me. So without further ado, I'm going to use this video to introduce our guest.
Signature Gate Systems and Welding Company.
Let's try that again. I got to restart it here. Let's see. How do I do that? Is it going to let me? There it is. All right. Bear with me, guys. Thanks for the technical difficulties.
The Apex Pro Tour, a part of Wild West Bass Trail, is brought to you by P-Line, because we fish. Lithium Pros, the one battery you need. Dish, tuned in to you. Signature Gate Systems and Welding Company. Duo Realis and Lithium Pro David Swendseid is the true freshman of the league, relentlessly chasing a 25-year-old dream to fish professionally. David made his debut with Apex in 2021. He has coined the saying, "Perseverance confines failure, frees genius, and arms the soul." Known for inventing and naming the tournament technique called spybaiting, the pro has proven its effectiveness, and his perseverance has paid off with not one, but 2 Apex Top 10 finishes in 2022. Look for this pro to continue his dream in 2023.
All right, so welcome back to the Noob Show, David. Sorry I messed that up. I bet you I practiced that 10 times before you came on, and of course the one time I need to do it live and I screwed it up.
Well, those guys at least hopefully got past that funny looking guy in there anyways, and that's the real juice of the meat of the show. So yeah, Apex is just it's the most awesome pro tour that I've been ever exposed to. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have lots of friends in the MLF and FLW and Bassmaster for a long time, and I have so much respect for Bassmaster, my favorite institution. But the guys in charge of the Apex Pro Tour, they've sacrificed so much to make this happen, and the hammers that are on that league are unprecedented. I mean, unprecedented. We're talking U.S. Opens champions, FLW champions, MLF champions, Bassmaster Elite top finishers, Bassmaster champions, one bass, and it just goes on. So, excuse me, I'm competing with just some monsters, and every day that I survive on that water is a great thing for me, and I'm loving every second of it. Some of those guys are really good friends now, and I have a lot of mad respect for them. But it's been a dream of mine for sure to move into this session. I wish I could have done it at the age of 19 or 20, but I'm here now, and so the nose is down and the hard work begins. So I'm excited.
Now I've heard about some things about Apex, and I think I've heard you talk about it on some other podcasts and stuff. And it almost seems more like the Iron Man of fishing tournaments, because some of those things are pretty intense, like the time and the length of these events.
Yeah, we just had, in fact, you mentioned the Ironman. We had an event called the Spartan 580, which was really a way that we could extend our hearts and minds to Leslie and Aaron Martin's, that family, and all the accomplishments that Aaron was so successful at doing, and having that come forth and be really our motivator for this event. So we had what they called the Spartan 580, which was slated for 9 days of continuous fishing. We got called off the water one day, so we weren't able to complete it in that regard. But 8 days is still straight on. I'm going to tell you, your hands are bleeding. There's definitely like mechanical issues. All of a sudden you find pain in places that you never knew. And then you wake up again and do it again. And the guys that persevered and made it to that final top 10 or top 9 in that event, I have so much. I was lucky enough to make it too, but I have so much respect for those guys because they got up every morning. It's one thing to fish one day, and then it's another thing to fish 3 days. You know, when you fish 3 days, you've been on. I mean, you've worked hard. And someone tells you wake up and go another 3 days, you know, you're scratching your head going, what the heck? So we battled everything: wind, rain, 8-foot waves. You know, I mean, we battled everything out there. So it was really. Hopefully it was, you know, a testament to our admiration for the Martins family and for all the things that Aaron did. Aaron was, as many know, he was a Duo Realis pro, which we were so grateful to have. But he was also a friend of mine for over 25 years. And we had this little pact going on that one day we would work together and do lure development. And we'd sit at a show and repeat that statement at every show, and eventually that dream did come true. So I'm really blessed to have had 5 minutes with him, and he's phenomenal, mind, body, soul, just phenomenal. So that Spartan 580 was a tribute to him, and I'm going to tell you, it was so funny because we were going to call that event the Ironman of bass fishing. That's where we were headed. And I was looking up and word searching. I found another institution that's came up with it basically about 3 weeks after we did, and so we separated from it, and we thought, well, who's somebody that endures, who's somebody that goes to the line, and you know the history of the Spartans. So that's where we created that from. But it was an amazing event, absolutely amazing.
It sounds intense. And I say I love fishing, and I'd be like, yeah, I do that. But probably, sometime around day 6 when your hands are bleeding and you're just beat to heck, then I'd probably be like, all right, 8 days, that's a stretch.
Yeah, the funny thing was, funny and odd, but funny also hilarious. I unfortunately caught COVID at the end, but what was kind of funny was I was already in the mode, tired, lethargic, getting up and try to make the next day last even better. And you're really trying to execute as best as possible because the time that you have on the water is valuable. And as that was going on, I ran a temperature and all that kind of stuff, but I would just put on clothes and drink a bunch of fluid and jump in bed and sweat it out. And then I'd go at it again. And it wasn't until the last day that I was like, well, you know what? I'm kind of having complications breathing. That I decided to check myself, and I do not recommend that, folks. If you're feeling ill, go see the doctor for sure.
It's funny that you say that. It almost makes you sound like I was so beat down, when I got COVID, I almost felt better, But well, that's interesting. That definitely would make it even tougher. So that's even more of a testament that you survived and made it into the top 10 or top 9. That's pretty impressive. So what else have you been up to since for the last 2 years? I mean, I know you've been busy watching you're probably, oh my goodness, the energy level that you have and the amount of different projects that you're in is it's crazy. I'm tired just watching it. So
well, thank you. I really do mean that. As folks know, I love fishing. I mean, it's really in my soul. And then sometimes that's an awesome thing, and sometimes that can come and bite you in the rear. But in that, all the partners and even my job, all those folks benefit from that enthusiastic and almost kind of dreamy state I get into with this sport called bass fishing. And I probably told the story too many times, but I'm a city slicker. I was actually born on the streets of Chicago. So for me to get to water was an oddity. And I went from Chicago to, didn't have the greatest family life, and went to Chicago to LA and was in the throes of LA downtown, basically. And out started the family challenges there too. But for some reason, I was spared in those experiences, and eventually ended up with a family that decided to take me fishing. And I'm going to tell you, I honestly was terrified. They set me on this chair, and they kind of said, "You stay here and you fish." And I knew nothing about fishing. And I happened to find the line, and all of a sudden, all I know is there's something on the end. Well, I thought it was a possessed, demon or something. I didn't know it was actually a fish. And I'm running back up the bank and dragging this poor bluegill about 100 yards up the bank. And they unhooked it and put it in a 5-gallon bucket. And I guarantee you, I stayed and watched that fish swim in circles until probably 2 a.m. I was so mesmerized by that experience. And that really, I have to say, is what kicked it off. A family took their time and their energy, their compassion, to give, really the city slicker. I could tell you whatever you wanted to know about asphalt and concrete, but they really did take me under their wing for that weekend, and that solidified my interest in fishing by far. I mean, that was the biggest experience.
That's awesome. And I think that just shines through in the way you talk about fishing to this day. You can almost see that love that just continues. And that's, I mean, to be honest, that's why I started doing this show, was to share, to try and get other people to feel about fishing how I feel about fishing. And I feel like that's, a motivation that you carry too, because just the way you are as passionate as you are about it, it kind of shines through. So.
And it is a difficult sport. We fishermen can appreciate each other. You're out there fishing in the kayak, and all of a sudden I see you skip a jig underneath a tree, and you whack this bass. I'm inside just bubbling and popping and bursting, but my wife is kind of like, that's great, honey. I'm glad you're having that experience. And so I know that the rest of the world, it's really hard to articulate our passion necessarily. It's easy to capture on film a wide receiver running, 4.340, and then jumping in the air and catching a ball. That we can see and illuminate in a sport. And the same thing with like professional soccer. You can watch these guys juke each other, and you can kind of live that experience. But in fishing, you have to really almost have this empathic viewpoint to even get started to appreciate what this guy is doing, standing or sitting in his boat for 8 hours, casting 1,000 times, and he's catching 2 fish. Wow, that sounds exciting. You know what I mean? So it's those little teeny pieces, those brilliant experiences that you have, that you relive through other people. And I say that all the time. I'm always going to be a student of this game. I know I've developed some things and been blessed enough to put those forward. But the truth of the matter is, every time the water ripples, I'm learning. Anytime the guy gets out there, I'm learning. And there's so many different facets, as you know. There's competitive angling, there's trophy hunting, there's just getting out on the weekend, there's lure collecting. There's all these little facets to fishing that you can dive into. For sure, that's what I guess I'm in love with, for sure.
And I think, it's the same bug that I have. And, I feel like, if you could get somebody to experience it just one time, you literally get hooked, just like the fish get hooked. That's why I think that's a good term for that, because it's what happened to me. And, I've seen it happen to people as I introduce them to it and get them to have those experiences. Then they definitely want to come back for more. So.
Yep, I'm with you. I'll go wherever you go on that one, bro. It's truthful. It's awesome.
Well, so I know when we first had you on, we really focused a lot on spy baits, and I was telling David before the show, he was nice enough to share a few with Ryan and I, and I still have half of the ones he gave me. One of them I snagged and lost. The other one, it was an interesting story. I was at our local lake, and in a testament to how well these cast, I somehow managed to cast mine up onto an overpass. So I was going for a bomb cast, just trying to get as much distance in it so I could have a nice long retrieve. And I actually threw it way further than I anticipated, and threw it up on an overpass. Initially, I was worried that I might have hit a car, but it never took off. So I don't think I hit a car up there, but I definitely snagged and broke it off when I was trying to pull it back down over the edge of the bridge. But yeah, so I have had luck. I actually I've caught 4 bass this year so far out of probably 10 trips. It's been cold, but the spy bait is responsible for 2 of those bass.
Nice.
And it really it was almost like kind of a silly moment because I had been throwing a blade bait a ton, and the way I was told to fish a blade bait was to drop it on the bottom, lift it up so it vibrates, and then drop it again, and just repeat back to the boat. And the place where I was fishing has a lot of vegetation right on the bottom, so it would come back, and I'd have to clean it off, like I maybe halfway through my retrieve, and it would stop vibrating, and I'd know, oh crap, it has some skunk on it, and I got to pull it back and clean it off. And finally, I was sitting there like tired of cleaning off my hooks, and I was like, there's got to be something else. And I was like, wait a second, I can use a spy bait, and maybe I'll count it down, and then I'll know I'll be right above that stuff.
Good. Yeah.
But I'll and as soon as I did it, probably I bet you maybe 5 casts, and I caught my first fish that day on the spy bait, and then I just caught another one the last time I went out on it. So
Nice.
yep, so I kind of kicked myself for not thinking of it sooner. It definitely has been good, and I like it because one of the things with at least our weather here in Pennsylvania in this time of year is it's always super windy. And so the spy bait does cast well for me through the wind. It's not something that I have trouble casting, as evidenced by being able to chuck it up on an overpass. That may have been wind assisted, but no, that was actually a while ago. So I think I've gotten a little more accustomed to casting them. But I know I just wanted to focus on that a little bit real quick, just to kind of give folks a general kind of overview of them, because I thought it was a really good and I think an often overlooked, or at least maybe a good, well-kept secret, at this point.
Well, and it really is. And maybe your listeners, which you have a great bunch of listeners too, and interactors, but maybe you can refer them back to that show as well, or that episode, where they can kind of extrapolate what they feel would be valuable for them. But I say this, I really start with this, and I mean this wholeheartedly. When I started with this whole idea of spy baiting, it came from a finesse application, and I have to give several people credit for this, but one of them most people know is Don Iovino, who he introduced doodling and some of these other light line finesse techniques, but I don't think people really knew how much he was shaking worms in a suspended fashion. And that's really what got me in thinking about this. And I used to do this Western shaking. I'm going to probably be talking to some publications about that in depth, just that whole technique. I did that as a kid, but we would shake worms 15 over 30 feet. We would shake worms 8 over 15 and isolate the bait. And the bait, we use different types of plastics to do this. But the idea was to get something that looks super fragile and all on its own. And the funny thing was, shaking a worm 15 over 30, it's a long, tedious process. If people think spy baiting takes a long time, they haven't seen nothing yet. You go out to, a corner or a bluff wall and post spawn, and there's fish in that area, but what you're trying to do is catch the big fish. So you shake over this bluff wall and you get the 5, the 8, the 9-pound fish that comes up and eats this little 4-inch, 6-inch, 3-inch bait, but that's isolated, looks like it's swimming on its own. So that was the real basis for spy baiting. What I also knew was, and I even have some, that the sinking prop bait was developed like in the 30s. And it played on to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, and maybe even into the 80s. But I have sinking prop baits, and maybe I'll just pull a couple for you to see that went back during these time frames. And but you can see them. They're they honestly, they have props on them. Some of them are a little bit more wildly in the hook arena, but but you can see they're not too far a departure from the current day, the current time. And I'll give you an example. Here's our Duo Realis sinking prop bait, and here's a bait I think was developed in the 50s, and maybe even earlier than that. But just to give you an example, the one with
they look similar.
The dorsal fin on it. So if I was to snip those hooks off, I would have basically the same body line. And look at the perch pattern. Now this is a Duo Realis one. Now obviously it's a sinking prop bait on steroids, but here we're talking about a sinking prop bait that really wasn't too far. So this was just yesteryear. So the sinking prop bait concept has been around for a long time. The Japanese then took it and had really very little success. Some success, but very, very little success. And they were targeting canals and shore, and so it kind of had a little spark in their industry, and then it just fizzled out. Well, during that time, I had maybe 40 different sinking prop baits, 30 at least, and I was isolating each bait, and I was testing them. I was recording them, depth, speed, trajectory, all these things, because I was trying to formulate a tool that could be used for tournament angling, literally being able to cut the seams in tournament angling and giving guys a real opportunity at a very difficult fish, which is that pronounced suspended bass. They get off the bottom, even smallmouth, they'll get off the bottom at St. Clair, and they'll move into that 8 to 15, and you'll see them go by the boat, and you'll try to throw a drop shot on them. The drop shot will sink to the bottom, and they won't go and get it. These kind of fish. The one thing about a suspended fish usually is they have the ability to almost see 360 degrees. They're out there in the middle, and they can kind of rotate at interest. The other thing that they have that's an advantage, which I know this by testing, is their ability to detect motion at great distances. They're predators, so motion is important to them. They can see a full-grown man at 60 feet away on a 3% in-grade or incline on a bank. They can actually see you. If they had hands, they would wave to you just to mock. So I have a great respect for bass and even other predator fish, but their abilities to make their environment conducive for what they want to do is epic. It really is. So spy baiting was trying in some ways to pull the layers off this area. Now in spy baiting, we also trace the bottom, we trace along weed lines, we trace timber lines, we do all those things. But the initial core idea behind it was to get the fish that was most difficult. And here's the thing I can promise you by all the data. I mean, I've recorded many fish. And so I've caught probably spy baiting without even thinking about it, 2,000 to 3,000 fish in my time. So, and again, that isn't, what I'm saying that is I'm saying I was targeting bass to do this idea, and eventually over time recording some of this data and keeping it close to the heart. But gaining this concept called spy baiting, the first thing that I realized was we were really on the right track, because we were catching abnormal size fish. I want to put it that way. I would fish a place that I knew had 1 to 3 pounders, and all of a sudden I'd catch a 4 or a 6 pound smallmouth. Go figure, right? So that correlation became more and more established the more I tested. And when I finally got to a place where I was sitting in reality, I remember sharing with my baby brother, I'm like, this is going to win professional events. And I remember thinking, no one's going to believe me, and honestly, there are guys like this all over the US, guys who are thinkers, who take on the concept of developing something, making it better, those type of think heads or think tanks. They're all over the US. I don't want to think of myself as anybody special for that, but what I did do was I took this concept and refined it, and then our R&D team put their blessing on it, and it got refined again and again, and pretty soon we had a super lure with a super technique and catching super fish. And that was really the basis for spy baiting. And the funny thing was, I keep saying this, it's going to win. It's going to win a major tournament. You have to think about that. What is the odds that this one lure will eventually impact a professional tour, and lo and behold, it happened starting back in 2013, but all the way from 13 to 17, and then Kevin Van Dam, day 3 and day 4 of a tour event, closed the door on it, catching his biggest fish, catching his second biggest weight, and his third biggest weight of those 4 days, spy baiting. And when I saw him do it, because I'm going to tell you right now, spy baiting is not really in his wheelhouse. What is in his wheelhouse is when he gets bit, he knows how to dog that I mean, he's just so good at it. So if he does get bit, if he can ascertain that information, he's going to figure it out. And that's where he's so brilliant. Some people get bit and almost have to slap themselves a second time to figure out that they're on the right track. That would probably be me. But Kevin was honestly, as soon as he figures out just a tiny bit of information, how he's able to manifest that in his computer is very respectful or respected. And he ended up doing that in that tour event, the Bassmaster Elite at St. Lawrence it was. And then a year later, Chad Gripsby won, and he won a tour event. And again, remember, these are tour events. These are the top anglers, competing. It isn't like, this open invitational. These are the top anglers competing, the best at their craft, competing. So to see somebody like Chad elevate, and when he texted me about it, I was so happy for him. He said, I think I'm onto something. Chad had called me 2 years prior and, picked my brain about spy baiting, and that poor guy had to listen to me for 2 hours, and I still feel sorry for that. But he's actually another he's an underrated angler. He's got a lot of cerebral ability, and I don't think he gets to shine as much as he should, because he's an amazing angler. But there you go. These two guys, and then the college kids, the high school kids. But I recorded just what was information that was coming to me on tournament angling, and in the professional side, there was basically $3 million that was won spy baiting. Now that's over a long period of time.
Right.
Don't realize that I introduced the technique like 2012. We are now 2023, right? So it's been a long time, but I just have a lot of enthusiasm and respect for that process to see that through. So I'm going to end it by saying spy baiting is truly a big fish technique. It truly is. My biggest spot is somewhere around 8 pounds, very, very close, maybe a tad over. My biggest largemouth is 12 pounds spy baiting on a spin bait 80 fix. My biggest smallmouth is 7 pounds 2 ounces, and then 4 days or 3 days later I caught a 614 spy baiting. So I don't do that every day, by the way, guys. I wish, but it's not me. But what was really cool about that was, again, it kind of solidified that theory or that hypothesis, which is, spy baiting is a big fish technique. And again, you think about it, you're talking about 3 inches of ABS, right? So how can 3 inches of ABS that weighs 3/8 of an ounce turn the tournament world upside down? And it really did that. It's really kind of cool sitting back and watching all these videos now. You go onto YouTube and there's, I think the last time I counted, there was 300 videos that talked about spy baiting.
Mm-hmm.
That was really, really cool to see. Obviously, other companies came in and created their versions. What they don't realize is when they do create a version, I actually take those lures and I test them feverishly to see where they line up within that atmosphere of proficiency and fish catching. So I guess I got to say I really appreciate the process. But the most important piece to me is that the guys have taken the opportunity to do this and have reaped the rewards. That to me is like the powerful thing. So I kind of nickname myself the proud papa of spy baiting, because I get to see guys that I don't even know on YouTube and go, yeah, this is an epic day. And of course you get the guys that kind of, you want to thwart it and put it in its own category and throw it away. And you'll get I guess you get a few haters in the group, but But what's kind of interesting is you can see guys developing through this. I've watched pros go from, dude, I can see how this works, to, dude, I'm going to win on this. Just in their learning curve. Brandon Polinick, who's a friend of mine, a phenomenal angler. He did that. I mean, he spent like 2 months, and he was like, yeah, I can see how this works. And then later he called me, or texted me, I can't remember now, but he called me and texted me and said, hey, I'm going to win on this. Now, he didn't win a big tournament on it. He did collect some, and it saved his bacon a couple times, he told me. But to watch that learning curve where these guys, and I'll tell you one mark in the learning curve I noticed, I'm giving this away, but one of those things that I can assess you on is, as you're giving me feedback about your cast and retrieve, what data comes to mind? Like what you see and what you internalize, what is the output? And if you say to me, man, this lure takes a long time to come back to the boat, I know you haven't got to the curve yet. If you say to me things like, dude, this lure has, it's I can feel the vibration, it's pulsing, and the line's twitching as I bring it in, I know that you're starting to refine your process, just how you are analyzing this experience. And you can see those guys make those milestones, and then when they finally get there, oh man, I'm going to be conservative, 20, 30 personal bests. And these are guys that sent to me on Facebook or got my number or saw me at a show. Dude, I got my personal best. And I just get, I'm going to get a little bit wicked on that. I just get excited about that stuff. I mean, I really do.
Rightfully so, man. I mean, yeah, knowing that you played a big part in that's got to be a good feeling. So
yeah, so in Duo we have basically 6 spy baits, and the reason why we have 6 is because that's how developed the technique is, the presentation and the basis for it. Some companies come out with 1, some companies come out with 3. We have literally 6. We actually have 8, but 6 that are regularly traveled through our community. And those 6 set you up for being successful with a bait casting rod setup and then also a spinning rod setup. Now, probably I'm the only person in the world that carries 3 spy bait rods in my boat. And part of that's being anal retentive, but the guys that are really secure and effective with a bait caster can now play the game spy baiting, because we have 2 clearly, we got 3, but 2 clearly that are set and weighted for bait casting, spin bait 100 and then the 72. I think I have a couple of them, but
I was going to share, I think I had the website up. There we go.
But the 100 is quite a departure from, our original spin bait 80. I'm going to just kind of show you.
Yeah. Let me make you bigger here. Solo layout. There we go.
Yeah. So you can kind of see there's quite a bit of meat between these guys here, and that 100 is almost, basically like the size of a jerkbait.
Right.
But I'll tell you something. The spinbait 100 has just as much, if I may, dynamic action as the spinbait 80 and 80G fix. So that whole rocking motion that we know about, the microprocessing, the shimmy that people are so familiar with, it's magnified in this bait. And that's really, really hard to do. The credit really goes to Duo. I was pleading with this type of configuration and was really setting my goals high to try to achieve that. What I'm getting at is the more mass and the more body you have in something, the more it takes to get it to work. And so to make this bait shimmy as intense as it does, to roll as intense as it does, and as committed as it does, is really, really a testament. So our Duo R&D team really get credit for that. The other one that we use for bait casting also, and you may know about this one, is called the Alpha series, and it's kind of built with tall sides on it. It's kind of shorter. It's 72 mm. It's shorter but taller, but this thing is really, really heavy. I mean, if you cast it, I always say this, if you cast this at somebody, you're going to kill them. It's very, very heavy. But now you can get down to a depth that, how can I say this? You can get down to a depth that that is you're unfamiliar with spy baiting, and you can do that, with 7-pound or 8-pound tests on a bait caster. So that kind of helped illuminate the whole side with bait casting. I've been throwing the baits on spinning rods and bait casters for a long time. And then we have a compact one. It's again part of the Alpha series, and that right there is 62 mm. So it's really petite. So that would cover your, like your emerging shad, forage, those type of things. This one is actually a prototype. It has all these little funky numbers on it and stuff, but that 62 Alpha that actually weighs 3/8 of an ounce, and it's actually much shorter than our 80 mm G-Fix or original. So in the spy bait world, Duo has taken a really big step away from folks. One, because we're the experts on this. We've spent the greatest amount of times from filming, sound to study, even to materials used, and that puts us kind of ahead of the folks. But there are some other companies that are really have contributed, and they've done a pretty good job with their practice too. So I don't tell guys you have to get a Duo Realis spin bait if you want to start to spy bait. You do it how you feel that you want to do it. If I can help with that, if I can tell you how crazy I was in the R&D phases with these bait, and you want to listen to that, then great, we'll bring the popcorn and we'll make it happen. But but I don't want people not to spy bait because they have a loyalty to another company or they have an interest in something else. I want everybody to do it because it is a very, very powerful experience, for sure.
Right. No, but it does make sense, because I do, having tried a few different ones, there is a difference, and I think there is a testament to that, how much the vibration is there. Having thrown a couple different ones, you can feel that difference, obviously. So it is worth it, maybe to maybe check them out, but definitely compare them.
Yeah, I encourage guys to do that, and again, it's kind of what you're wanting to attain. When I study crankbaits, for example, there's certain things that I look for. You'll hear guys say, for example, I really like a crankbait with a lot of erratic action, and that can mean so many things when you start to pull it apart and pull it out of the sky. For some guys, that may mean a bait that actually swims on its own in a rhythmic but erratic,
A
signature.
big wobble, yeah, right.
And for others, it may be, well, it's always off base, and then when it hits something, it's even more off base, and therefore it's. And I go the opposite way. I want a crankbait, for example, if we're talking about crankbaits, to track like 100% down the path that it needs to go and not veer from it at all, because I can always make that lure act up. What I can't do is always make that lure be 100% consistent in its track or in its tracing mode. So for me personally, I'm looking for the ultimate, 4-wheel drive or the ultimate sports car to do what it was designed to do. And I can do the wheelies and the spins and all that other stuff later, So that's the way I look at it. But people have different ways about how they fish and what they want to experience. So I encourage people to get out there and just do it. But spy baiting is probably one of the most deadly techniques. There's a pro on the Apex Pro Tour. His name's Colby Pearson, and I knew him when he was a kid coming up. And he adopted spy baiting, and he probably spy baits more than I do now on tour.
Wow.
I mean, he's got it down. Like, he's really, really got it down. And I'm really, really proud of him. One, because he's no longer a student of the game. He's a proficient competitor, and I have to compete against him. That's kind of the worst thing ever. But he's really got this down. And we'll share notes, spy baiting. He'll say, he's not afraid to tell me, yeah, I was looking at fish through the spy bait this week, and this is what happened. And I can tell he can close his eyes now. You can drop him anywhere in the world, and he'll tell you by his natural exposure and time with that lure where to fish that, when to fish that, anywhere. That's how proficient he's gotten with it. And there's a lot of guys that have gotten that way, and that it really tickles me when I hear about the guys making it to that level. But spy baiting is like drop shotting, or like this proficiency to spinnerbait fishing. Everyone knows what a spinnerbait does. but you know a really good spinnerbait fisherman when you see him.
Mhm.
You're like, that guy, he knows what he's doing. And that's the thing. Spy baiting gives you that opportunity to kind of isolate yourself. You mentioned it, it's a secret. It's always a secret. And I'll tell you why. It kind of flares up when it gets successful, and then it flares back down, and then it kind of dissipates and goes away for like a couple months. And then one guy pulls it out of the box and wrecks him, and it starts back up again. It's hilarious how that gets going.
Well, yeah, and I was going to mention, you know, if you're really interested in learning the ins and outs of throwing it, go back and listen to our episode. If you just Google paddle and fin on YouTube and do spy baiting, you'll find it. That's how I found it today. I know. I also what actually the first time I heard you talk about it, you actually were on Alex Rudd's show. And he did a two-parter that was almost 2 hours worth of spy baiting, and that's where I first heard it, and I was like, oh, I gotta have that guy on my show. So you could, if you guys want even more you know, super in-depth on spy baiting, go check out Alex Rudd's podcast, because David was on there and had a ton of information. But yeah, so I think if you guys are interested at all in throwing it, it's a great technique. I think when we had you on before, you described it as it's really easy to pick up and use, but it's hard to master.
Yeah.
So and that has been my experience as well. You know, it definitely took me a while to feel like I was doing it right, and to have confidence in it. But now I obviously it's definitely something that I always have in the back of my mind of, hey, would that work here? You know, sometimes it takes me stumbling over something that you know, like with the grass stuff, before I, you know, remember, oh yeah, I can try this. But
and I've told guys, because I'll always get this question, what, you know, spin bait would you got 6 of them, or you got 8 of them, okay, which one would you use, and what line, what rod would you use, you know, that kind of thing. If you could be, you know, nailed down to one spy bait, how would you do it? And I always come back to straight fluorocarbon, 6-pound test, a medium light action rod with a decent backbone, and a 2500 2000 2500 series spinning rod, and you're spy baiting. And guys that can come close to that, you're gonna get there. You know, some guys say, well, all I got is a drop shot rod and my drop shot, and I say, start with that. Then just put 6-pound test on it. Now again, I'm a little bit at the nth degree, so I fish like Seaguar Tatsu, because it's a generation of R18, which R18 is a kind of a superior fluorocarbon in Japan, and it's part of the Seaguar family, but R18 is kind of pushing the echelon of that composition. So I use a higher quality fluorocarbon when I'm doing this technique, but there's other companies that do that who have really good. Toray High Grade is a very, very good. Many guys probably don't even know that company, but Toray High Grade is a very, very good fluorocarbon. It's expensive. And then there's you know, Sunline is much more predictable. It's going to be much nicer to you in the long run. The high quality lines. I don't worry so much about abrasion resistance. Then the second thing I say to guys is, I want you to figure out where you can throw that bait. I want you to go into 6 inches of water, and I want you to go into 50 foot of water. I want you to figure out where you can throw that bait. And one way of learning this without cursing me out later because you lost the lure is to take the hooks off. Literally take the hooks off the bait, make the long cast, trace the areas that you're wanting to trace, sink the bait, let the bait fall to the depth that you want to, and get familiar with it. And you'll actually get bit. And you know, of course, you'll probably curse me out anyways, because now you got bit with the hooks on. But you do that, and you actually learn more and more about this bait, and that bait becomes kind of an intimate process for you. And then when it's time, you know, you could stroll that spin bait its talents, and by doing that, you kind of cut the learning curve quite a bit. I'm going to say by 30%, just kind of doing those things, getting lined up correctly, and then taking the hooks off and fishing. And you learn how to roll it on the bottom. You learn about its sinking speed, you know, those type of things. And then you can grow from there. I did a video years ago called The Essentials to Spy Baiting Volume 2. And it'll talk about line presentation, not all the spy baits, but it has some of them out there. But you can get on there, watch that video. I think it's like 8 minutes or 10 minutes, and have something in your skull ready to go. That's more than just a beginner's novel to this. It's kind of like, what do I need to be successful at this presentation? And that's where it will really help you. I'm going to do I hate to say it this way, but kind of a pros pro to spy baiting. It's going to be pretty technical, honestly, and maybe only 5% of the world's going to be interested. But the reason I'm going to do that is because I want to show the range that spy baiting has, the ability that spy baiting has, that guys can get away from, oh, I only can fish it in crystal clear water, over rock piles. I'm giving maybe a poor example. I'm going to help open up that, illuminate that process for them a little bit more. And that offers the guys that are very experienced kind of a new dimension into spy baiting. So I'm going to do that. Again, it'll probably be long and boring. Here's what you do, how, that kind of stuff. But I think the junkies will have good fun with it.
Oh yeah, no, I could definitely see that. Well, I'll try and look up the essentials of spy baiting one that you did, and I'll put that in the show notes, and link our show too. So we should have plenty of material there if you want to learn that. So check out that in the show notes. That being said, Duo has been very busy. I've seen a lot of cool stuff, so I wanted to give you a chance to kind of talk about some of that other stuff that you guys are doing.
Well, and I think this is going to be kind of cool in a couple of different ways, Sean. I would like to, first of all, I want to say thank you to your show. You don't have to have me on here. You have the ability to pull whoever you want, bring it to your audience, and so I really appreciate your kindness and consider me to provide and educate your clientele or your fans, and I really do. I really appreciate that. And the other part of it too is I think these podcasts, each company or each entity that does this, they really do have something special. Probably if I had nothing else on my hands, I'd have 20 different podcasts. This is the way my mind works, unfortunately. And each podcast would be into a dimension of fishing. But what I'm trying to say is that's what you guys offer. You guys offer people a resting place to kind of come and learn and gain information without the stringent requirement of everlasting researching and the exhausting process that can take. And I know what that's like being on the other side. I remember when there wasn't such a thing as YouTube and Facebook, and you were trying to figure out fish behavior and lures. And now you've got guys telling you, you just Google it and it comes up. So the information highway is, 100-fold than what it used to be. And that I think is a testament to you guys providing a lot of these platforms like podcasting, especially to your group. So hats off to you guys. And you do an awesome job as well. I'm going to introduce, if you don't mind, kind of a direction that Duo has gone. We've gone a little bit more into the soft plastic range. And this is a good place to go for us because a lot of what we do is hard bait analysis and hard bait R&D and that kind of stuff. And I'm going to tell you, I get high off that. But soft baits, you still, if you want a good soft bait, you kind of have to start thinking outside the box a little bit on doing that, because soft baits are easier to duplicate. And they're kind of easier to kind of cancel out too. I got an 8-inch worm. I don't need anybody else's 8-inch worm. So there's this this delicate place for a company that thinks or wants to think, and I wish I could take credit for these soft plastics, but I can't. They're really not my ideas. They were ideas and brilliant ideas of our R&D team. But I'll take you there. Some of this stuff is going to be really applicable to your kayakers. That I guarantee. But I'll start with what we call it's called the Wiggler Crawler, and I'll show you. It's kind of, and it's basically a 6-inch worm, very, very close to a 6-inch worm. And you look at it, you go, well, that's kind of cool. We have different colors, watermelon and green pumpkin, etc. But one of the cool things about this worm, and it comes in many sizes. We have it in a 4.8, a 5.8, We have it in a 2.8. I'll break one of those out probably. But if you look at this worm, I'm going to try to do this a little bit here. You'll see there's some flat spots in the worm as I roll the worm.
Okay.
Those flat spots capture and press water, and water presses against those flat spots to create action. So not only can you Ichi Wacky rig this, or flick shake, or that's some of the other names. You can Texas rig it, you can split shot it, you can shaky head it. The thing that Duo added to it was not only we have a hard nose, and so the rigging, the propensity to rig here is whoops, it just lasts a little bit longer than per se a softer one. The flat sides create the action, and then at the base or the bottom of the worm is this little oval shape. Well, that's actually hollow. It captures air. Okay. So it allows the tail of the bait to rise up and be at a different buoyancy effect than the rest of the worm. Again, creating action. And we have it in a 2.8 size, which you think, wow, that's pretty petite. But the idea again is to give guys kind of the just a little bit of an angle, an advantage that maybe they didn't have. So our wiggler crawler is a awesome worm, and I fish it on the Apex Tour. Stuff that I'm going to show you here too, guys. I actually fish professionally. If you call me up and said, "Hey, David, have you ever fished X, Y, Z?" and I don't, maybe the company I work for would be mad at me. But I would be honest and tell you, no, I don't fish that, because part of it is for me to give you guys the best information that I can. And so I'm brutally honest. But you know, most of the things that we develop at Realis, I've already used multiple times. But that worm in particular, I used on tour a bunch. I relied on it a bunch for a lot of different techniques. But I love that worm actually. So
it's pretty neat. It seems pretty versatile. You know, a lot of times your other worms that you'll have a worm that's good at for wacky rigging, but not so good at drop shotting or shaky head or something like that. But that seems like it covers a lot of bases in just one worm.
Yeah, I mean, you can really do a lot with that worm. We don't have, 50 different colors in that. So, but I always tell guys, we'll have base colors, and those base colors, I help teach guys, you can articulate those base colors in different ways by bleaching out the worm, by adding dye to the worm. So you can do things to the worm to kind of change hues and cause contrasting if that's need be. Keep your mind open, and then that worm can be used readily any way you want it to. So, but I really like that worm a lot. I know I'm being biased. The other thing I want to talk about, we were talking earlier about Western shaking. I did this as a kid. I would shake baits 8/15 with 4-pound test and a loop, kind of what we call a loop shake. And like I said, I probably have to give Don Iovino the most credit. My mind goes crazy when I come up with ideas, but it was really kind of him and a couple other established anglers really set me in the right direction of looking at that. So I do loop shaking, Western shaking, which now in Japan is called mid-strolling.
I was going to ask, can you just explain a little bit like what you mean by when you say 8/15? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Like,
so if the bottom was 15, then I'm fishing the worm in 8.
Okay.
Over the bottom.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
That's a lot of what we call real estate in between. So to do that, you have to create a motion with your line that will keep the lure in movement to stay there. Maybe it sinks too fast or it starts to sink out of action. So you start to impart this action with your rod. And my rods are very high tech. They're very soft, but they're designed to handle and manage very light line from 2-pound test to 4-pound test, for example. Okay. So that's kind of the focal point of Western shaking. And then to do it over a certain depth is what is called mid-strolling. Now, from mid-strolling come all this other stuff that we talk about. So I kind of call it like mid-Western shaking, which has excited. And by the way, Don Iovino used to go to Japan probably before I was born. I mean, the guy was over there in Japan. At least I know in the 80s he was over there in Japan. But he was probably over there even earlier, secretly too. And he influenced a lot of things over in Japan. So you just give him credit where credit's due. But his shaking techniques and his ability to fish over suspended topography it was unprecedented back then. It was, I mean, it was light years ahead of its time. And I just adopted and adapted that to curtail the way that I like to fish, and then continue to refine it. But that being said, I have a worm. If we can, if maybe we can call it that loosely, it could probably be called a shad bait too. But this is called the Finder Shad.
Okay.
And you'll see in the package, it shows arrows going up along the sides of the body. That's saying that the worm will actually rotate.
Interesting.
So what we do with this worm, I actually fish it two different ways. One is I fish it on a drop shot, believe it or not. And the reason I do is because the worm has such tremendous action. And I'm going to kind of show it to you as we get here. But again, you can see this kind of shape. See that kind of tall-sided shape? That tall-sided shape is going to work against itself. Also, if you look, you'll barely see it. I don't know if I can, but you'll start to see little teeny fins right at where the body tapers into the tail.
Okay.
Those fins are for stability. They cause the worm to stand a certain way. And then at the very end, you see almost looks like this spear, you know, and it has kind of a like wings on the end of the spear, and that is to drag and capture water as well. So this little tail is doing quite a bit of action when it pulls against water being the stationary medium. It starts to pull against water, and that tail starts to do different action. The body, because of its shape, will start to roll and swim a certain way. And you will mid-stroll this bait into a water column, just like we were talking about shaking or loop shaking. And you can make basically make this bait swim across. Now, rigging it to do that, you take what we call a jig hook is probably the best way to describe it. It's a jig hook. It has that 90 eye and then a 90 bend, and then the shank, and then the throat of the hook. And that goes, and you skin the top of that bait, and it comes out. And that's what you're going to use. And I should have brought some hooks and did this for you, but it's kind of like Texas rigging, but the eye of that hook is going to sit up here.
Okay.
And then the shank of the hook's going to go just underneath the skin of the body, and then the hook's going to come out. The point's going to come out, and that's where it's going to be. As you shake this bait, it's going to start to rock. Now, what you may want to add, and we do this, is you can free line it, and that free lining means you have no weight on the bait, and you let it sit out there on the surface and do it, or what we call subsurfacing, and you let it kind of move. But in other words, you take a little nail weight, you clip it, and you put it in the head. Or what I like to do a lot of times is I like to put the nail weight, and I'm talking tiny little sliver of nail weight, right into the base or the belly of the worm. And that gives it what I call a keel all of a sudden. And as I shake this worm, this thing's going to roll, and it's going to swim as it's coming through the water column, depending on how much shake I give. And when I say shake, I'm shaking the line out to the bait. So there's this reflection that's going into place. I'm shaking the line out to the bait. As my line gets out to the bait, the bait is kind of stopping it, and it's coming back to me. I'm not trying to pull the line like this through the water. I don't want this motion. I want the worm to kind of like this, you know, and just kind of move its way. And the reason why it's staying in linear fashion to me is because I'm incorporating the line into the reel as I'm doing this shaking. And with the baits of old, we had more of what we call this motion, or the line would loop and do that, and we would shake this way. But with these baits, they have the ability to kind of rock, so you can swim them basically by having a lot of loose line and bringing that line in as you're reeling, shake, 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 shake. And you can change that cadence. It can be super intense, or it can be a little bit lazy, and you can find that cadence. But you'll see it. You'll start swimming it in the water, and you're like, whoa, this is really, really cool. So this lure is designed for what the Japanese call mid-strolling, or what I call Western shaking for suspended fish. Both are basically the same. One just is a little bit more evolved. And like I said, you can do it without a weight, or you can do it with a weight. But then the other way I fish this is on a drop shot, just because the action is like killer. So
I was going to say, the way that tail is wiggling, just you trying to hold it steady there is kind of crazy. So
yeah, I mean, no, I had no coffee this evening, and so but it's really, really cool. And another way that I've played with it is taking kind of the micro Ned heads, the really, really small Ned weights, really light, and I've fished it that way. And I've had some success with it that way. But drop shotting it has been awesome. And then obviously Western shaking it has been a go-to for me. We have a V-tail shad. That was one of our first plastic baits. It's a fish body, flat top, kind of belly, and then it has two forks or a fork coming out of it with spade tail basically, but it kind of comes out split. And that bait is only like 2.5 inches long or something. It's really, really tiny. I use that a lot for drop shotting. I didn't bring any with me because it's been around for a while. Most guys that follow us know about that bait. But what has been new and has come out that I want to spend some time talking about is what we call the wiggle stick, and then also what we call the wiggle RnD Slim. The wiggle stick is kind of like a shortened, blunted example of maybe like a Senko.
Okay.
You can, and I'll open up these two. You can wacky rig it if you want to, hook or weight, or you can Ned head rig it. And the way I like to fish it is I like to Neko rig it. So that means putting a nail weight into the head of it, and then having a band on it, and then having a hook come through it this way, and I move it through on the bottom through the water this way.
Okay.
As long as I move this one, the wiggle stick is a 4-inch bait. So as long as I move this one and keep the moving, it won't fall over. It'll actually stand up. It's got a lot of vibration to it. It looks funky. It has obviously dips and dives in it too. And it's got flat sides on it, but it's got a lot of action. But it's weighted, it's salted, it's scented. And so when you stop, it's going to want to fall.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I Neko rig it, or I'll freelance and put a jig head here and fish it kind of a what we call, flick shaking, or I'll hook it with no weight and let it kind of, Senko fall. But a lot of ways, a lot of times I'll actually fish in tournaments, Neko rig. It's really lively doing that. So I know that on the inside. So that's why I fish that. That's a weighted shorts, kind of short, like I said, 4 inches, salted, scented bait, stick bait is what we call it.
Okay.
Where we progressed from there was moving into Ned rig fishing. And Ned rig fishing has been around for a long time. We used to do it before it was probably even called Ned rig with an old mushroom head. And I want to say I was turned on to the mushroom head probably by like Steve Quinn of In Fisherman or something. It was a long time ago as a kid, but every once in a while you'd find a guy in a garage who would pour these mushroom heads, and the mushroom heads made the lure stand up. So you could rig any type of plastics. Now that whole jig head has gotten much more refined. They got really good keepers. The hooks are high quality. It's a different ball game now. But we came out with basically a Ned bait that we could do this with. And I'm going to I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take a prototype, but let's see, here we go. But here's the Slim, it's called. Where are we? Okay.
Yeah. So it has that same kind of wavy body, but it's a smaller profile, obviously.
Yeah, smaller. And we have two tones and a bunch of different colors that are trying to kind of wicked in it. But so that you guys can see it a little bit better, I'll show you a bait and prototype. We have our own, how can I say this, kind of our own proprietary process in elastomer. So we have a bait, and this is the same bait, but that it will stretch just like a elastomer. We've scented it, we've salted it, so we've given it kind of flavor, and you know, scent is usually used as one of the factors to add weight, but in this case, with our compound, this bait will stand on its own. It'll float. So
Okay.
it's really nice. You just put a little Ned head on it, and it'll stay up the whole time, no matter where you fish it or what you do with it. But I wanted to show you, so that's why I'm using this color. This is a prototype color, but
Gotcha.
prototype worm that we use so that we can see it at different depths. But again, it's elastomer. I always recommend that if you use any elastomer, that you find a way to secure the package and not let it mate with other plastics, or you.
Oh yeah, that
That's
gets
all
to be a
about.
mess. Yep.
But the cool thing about this is, again, we were looking at, if we wanted to get into this Ned thing, how can we push the envelope? You know, and listen, there's a lot of really good Ned baits out there. I think I counted one night 72 or something like that of these things we called Ned baits, and then there's variations that could be Ned, right? And then there's guys that say, all I do is just cut the Senko down, you know.
Yeah.
So it kind of just depends, but there was quite a few Ned baits. So entering this process, really, we wanted to give our anglers, our fan base, and maybe even some newcomers kind of a super worm, you know, give it something a little bit more. Well, we have these scented worms. They literally stink. They're so scented. And then we wanted to still have salt in it, which is almost an oxymoron because we use salt for ballast as well. And so we're going to have salt in it, but yet we wanted it to rise and float, have a high buoyancy effect. So we were able to accomplish that. And then we created our own kind of proprietary elastomer. So there's some different things in our elastomer that allow us to do, you know, to be flexible with our molds and the processes within the worms. So really proud of this process. I think guys are going to be really comfortable. The kayak guys there's a lot of kayak guys that Ned fish. Those guys are going to probably find this one of the easiest baits to throw, to fill, to work with. But I'm really excited about it because it's kind of like, I mean, I'm not excited about Ned fishing because we just kind of cut and pasted to make it happen. But I'm excited about it because we took the thought and the process and put it in place. So it isn't just another worm out there. We were actually, how can we give our guys something special? So that was our goal, and I think that was pretty attainable. So I'm pretty proud of it in that respect.
Very cool. Very cool. You know, like you were saying, it's hard. You know, the soft plastics have been around for a long time, so it's hard to come up with an original thought. But the ones that you showed, at least, do look different than most of the stuff that's out there. So
Well, and you know, we talked about the shapes and things. Well, all those shapes have a specific
it's purpose built, right?
yes. And
Yeah.
that's what's kind of cool. So you'll drop that worm and it's actually going to be swimming its way down. So it'll just have a lot of things. I think guys will be like, wow, that's really cool. I'll give you a tip. One thing that I do with my Ned fishing, and I haven't seen anybody else do on tour, professionally or otherwise, it doesn't mean that it isn't being done, guys. But what I end up doing, and I don't have it with me, but I'll use let me see if I can do something here. Oh, I'll use a paper clip just to kind of emulate. I will take a threader. You know what a threader is in fly fishing, right? A line threader. And I'll take the threader and I'll actually put it through the worm and up through the tip of it. And then I think you can see that. Right? Okay, there we go. And what I'll end up doing with that is I will take that line and put it through the threader. And the line I'm going to use is like really thin mylar, kind of like an iridescent mylar or a hologram mylar. And I'll pull that mylar down into the body. So what ends up happening is the mylar becomes the most narrow point on the worm. But also what happens is it becomes the most fluid or the most the ability to enact the most action. So the worm's already got action. What I'm doing now is I'm creating what I call a little tracer, and I put the tracer in there. It increases vibration. It kind of flows naturally. When the worm's setting still, it's still moving, and I can give the fish another focal point. And honestly, it's just one teeny little strand. Sometimes I've done two, and they're really, really just tiny pieces of marlar, honestly, about the size of that in there. Again, this is pretty small bait. A fish is going to come around and look at this thing. He's going to get closer. She's going to get closer. So I'm offering her another marker by putting that there, if that makes sense. Again, that's kind of weird science kind of stuff, but I'm into motion and movement, and that was one way to accentuate that as well.
We've had guests before, especially I've been trying to focus on some cold water baits, and one of the things that I've heard repeatedly with my cold water baits is secondary action. So you're not working the bait, but the bait still has movement. Like it's sitting there on the bottom, but something about it is still moving. And that's, something that's very important from what we've heard in cold water tactics is that secondary movement, so that, you're not imparting any action, but just because of a tiny bit of current or whatever is moving in the water, that the bait is still has some kind of, whether it's just waving there in the current or and that's really big for especially cold water tactics. And so that sounds like a prime example of that.
Yeah. And you're running right down the line. The movement in cold water, bass are cold water animals, so cold-blooded animals. So what ends up happening is, as the temperature falls, they almost become like they're non-existent, or they become really mechanical. So as the temperature falls, a bass can move. I don't know, maybe it's 0 to 30 or something, but they can do that in a 10 or 12 foot burst. So they can go 10 feet in a second. I mean, they have the ability to burst. So in the summertime, you may have even experienced this. You take your top water bait and you cast it, and it's gliding across the water surface. And just before it hits the surface, the bass eats it, and everyone goes, "Whoa!" Well, that bass saw that prey object afar and zoomed in with speed and accuracy and snatched that bait out of the air. That's how quick they are. The transverse to that, or the opposite to that, is when they actually can't move, even though they want to. So they're hungry, but yet they're mechanically delayed in moving. And the same 10 feet may take them 8 seconds to get over there to your jig. And it's like this, and it's kind of like this. And then pretty soon they're over there. And meanwhile, you've heard guys talk about soaking a jig. Well, when you soak a jig, that's half the battle. Half the battle is calling guys and gals over to kind of look what you have. And then once they get over there, giving them time to consume it. So soaking has a real, dead sticking has a real purpose. It really does, especially when you talk about how bass are affected by temperature. And it doesn't take a lot. A temperature can go from 70, to say 65, they're really active, and then all of a sudden drop to 58, and it kind of slows them down. Again, we're not talking about fronts and storms and all this other stuff, but I'm just talking about temperature drop, and then it drops again. But you can watch as the temperature drops. I've seen bass come up to spawn on railroad beds or whatever, and then all of a sudden the cold water drops in temperature, not in height, and those fish have a hard time moving, just moving. You can pitch a jig to them 4 feet away, and it takes them forever to get to it. That's because they're cold-blooded. So soaking the bait, having that ability to entice them from long distances because you have a little bit of natural movement in there is really heading down the right path, in my opinion, for sure.
Cool. Well, anything else from Duo that you want to share, or
I think that's it. Maybe the next time I come out, I've got a couple hard. Oh, you know what I will talk to you about real quickly is I introduced these. They're called the nano hooks. So now guys can replace their spin baits hooks if they want to.
Yeah,
we have those. Tackle Warehouse has them. A place called Three Rivers carries an abundance of them. But you can get these now. This nano hook when we first came out with this hook, that was part of our technology in the spin bait series, the last series that we came out, which was our newest series called the I class. And so if you're going out shopping for a spy bait and you wanted the Duo Realis, look for that yellow marking right there called all new I class. That gives you the latest and greatest in performance, meaning I trick that bait out quite a bit. It actually casts further. It accentuates more. It has a better signature. It's significantly more durable. We don't mount into a mounting block anymore. And we secure it completely. And it has quite a bit of ability to kind of tweak it, I'm going to just say, and I'll get into that when I do the videos, but it allows a little bit more. And then we got into chromofusion painting process, which is taking paints and making them appear one way and then another by light, by using light and motion. So we did that with what we call the IU. The BKIU is one color I developed, but if you rotate that color, it will turn colors in the sun as the bait is moving. So you're offering quite a bit appearance of motion, for example. So those nano hooks were part of that upsurge in refinement to making our spin baits even better. And those hooks, I promise you, are ugly, ugly sharp, because they have almost like your mother's Teflon coating on her frying pan. It's like that. I mean, it's just super slick. So don't even mess around with them. I've already put the hooks on my hand a couple times and tried to man up, you know, as I'm pulling them out. But they're just really, really slick hooks. But high quality, our own design from shape and length, etc. So we're really, really proud of that hook. But they're called the nano hook, and you can use them for jerk baits and spy baits, etc. So there's several little sizes out for that.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, very cool, man. David, I appreciate you coming on. Always tons of info. Man, I wish we had 4 hours to talk, because I know we could fill it. So, but we'll save that for another time. But I wanted to give you a chance to shout out sponsors and anything like that you want to, and then also where folks can find you, where folks can pick up Duo Realis baits and the hooks and stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, guys, a lot of guys have already, are kind of shopping enthusiasts, and they go to not Walmart. They go to Tackle Warehouse. I was going to say,
I wish it was available at Walmart.
But they go to Tackle Warehouse, and they can order the stuff right there. But there's a lot of places. There's Carolina Fishing Tackle that has quite a few Duo Realis stuff. Like I said, Three Rivers, they're really a specialty shop. Hookup Tackle, which is out in the desert area. That guy is he's really, really good with his shop. He's a monster mega bass store, but he carries our Duo Realis. I like to give all these guys props because they work so hard on their stores. But there's I'm gonna say, gosh darn, what was the name of a newcomer? Outdoor. Clear Lake Outdoors is another one. So Clear Lake Outdoors, they're carrying some of our stuff. But you can definitely go online and just kind of hit Duo, and yeah, we'll come up for sure. Maybe one of these days I'll do a podcast just on stores. There's a ton of them that are doing really, really well. But yeah, and then I would like to give a shout out. This is kind of personal to me, but it means a lot to me. I want to give a shout out to Allison Bass Boats. They're the first factory bass boat company that took interest in what I was doing. I'm very much into bass boats. I like the bottom of a bass boat as well as I do the top of a bass boat. It's important for me to run in rough chop as well as to run in smooth stuff. So I'm a fanatic around that stuff. I've been in so many different boats, Bullets, Bass Cats, Phoenix, Legend. I've had Champion, I've had Rangers, Skeeter, and all of them I enjoy in a lot of different ways. But Allison has been really dear to my heart because of their legacy. They have over a 60-year family legacy, family-owned legacy, and the stuff that Darius and Paul Allison developed would blow your mind away. I encourage guys who want to fish out of a kayak, but also want a bass boat, to really look up Allison Boats. You'll find their history is unprecedented. The stuff that's happened. You guys probably remember all the cigarette boats back in Florida and the movies that were surrounding those cigarette boats, like Miami Vice and some of these other things. Well, there's a guy by the name of Reggie Jr. who borrowed the bottom of an Allison boat basically and created world record speeds. So just the innovation, and they were light years ahead of themselves, the quality, build quality. So I get fanatic about that, but it's a family run business, and they've been so kind to me to bring me on board. I'm basically, by project, the first time they ever took a risk on somebody to give them a spot within, what now we would call a pro staff position, etc. So I'm really, really honored. There is a cohort that works with Allison by the name of Fast Bass Marine, Tim. He can take any bass boat and make it run better. He's just really that good. So, and I've been a longtime friend of his. I harass him all the time, but he's really fun. I'm going to actually have my boat with him. We're going to do some special projects with it, testing, etc. And I just decided that I wanted him to be a part of that. I think he's a great guy. So he's, like I said, his name's Tim Powell, and he's from Fast Bass Marine. I want to give a shout out to Kevin Bennett of Lithium Pros. I had almost a life-ending experience in my garage with some electronical equipment. I won't go into details about that. That's not what's important. But basically, everything could have caught on fire, and there was things that were heating up. And Kevin was so quick and it had nothing to do with Lithium Pros at all. There was no interaction with that. But Kevin was so quick to take me through my electronic systems and say, you want to make sure that these things are isolated, that we don't have a parasitic charge going here. And he helped me basically take all the other electronic issues or questions and eliminate them. And I'm sponsored by Lithium Pros, but he's just a super kind man. And he literally got out of bed on the phone and helped me get through this thing, which could have been a really, really scary, my house could have burned down kind of situation.
Wow.
So to have him take the time and the energy to help me get into a new place and a sense of comfort was tremendous. But he really did. He's a brainiac, and he went through and said, you still need to check this system out, even though it is part of this. We want to make sure that everything on your boat is working. And again, had nothing to do with Lithium Pros, but he came forward and went through my whole boat with me to make things work. So my heart goes out to him, just being super kind to make that happen. I'm with Seagar. The guys at Seagar have always been good to me. So I do want to give a shout out to Seagar. It's my favorite line. It's my favorite line. I'm weird. So it's my favorite line because I've taken it to the lab and tested it under different conditions. I won't go into the details of that, but that's what brought me the comfort about using Tatsu. And I used it before I ever was sponsored by them. Duo Realis, who I work for, but also those guys have allowed me to compete. And that's really hard to do, juggle, both concepts, of course. So Roman made, my dear friend, Mr. Takayama, we've been friends for many, many years. We were friends before I even got employed with Duo. And he is the guy who made the Roman made mother, and the negotiator, and then the Roman made chaser. I don't know if you know, but the Roman made chaser is like 16 inches and weighs 2 pounds. Like, who throws that? Well, we do. So maybe one evening I'll bring him on, but he's a dear friend of mine for a long, and he's just been really supportive. And these guys have been really supportive of the Apex Tour, which is the pro tour out west. And I want to give a shout out to the CEO of the Apex Tour, Jeremy DeHart. He's taken a bunch of us pros and given us a place to compete, supported us in that process when very, very few people have ever thought about doing something like that. We get 100%. I can't talk about the actual payout amounts in our tournaments because that's not our focal point. But we get over 100% back on our events, and for a man to basically say, I'm not taking anything from the pro tour, I want it to go back to you guys, is a powerful statement about his love and compassion for our sport. He's got and I'm going to be ignorant here, but he's got a pro kayak tour now that just started, I think, last year. You may want to look into that, but it's really, really cool. And we use, by the way, on Apex, we use your guys's rating system. The what am I thinking of? Gosh darn, what is it called? forget. But anyways, we measure our fish as well as we weigh them.
Okay.
Tourney X is what it is. But
yes.
but we actually measure our fish. So our format is hybrid. It's basically 5 fish to the ramp, I mean to the scales, and then throughout the day we measure those fish. So we'll take those measurements and count those fish, and they go. When you get to day 2, you can either get into the top 10 by numbers of fish caught, scorables, or by weight.
Okay.
Those are the 2 ways into the top 10. So it's a really excited format. And sometimes they plant us on lakes. They don't give us any time to pre-fish. We get 0. Here it is, you guys. You're going to figure it out. And we compete right there. So it's been exciting to watch that show, by the way. The episodes are on Pursuit Channel. And then if you have a computer or a phone, you can get on to Outdoor Action, outdooraction.tv, I think is what it's called. And all the episodes are there. And you learn stuff. We're Western anglers, so we've pulled some different rabbits out of the hat to make things happen. And so guys get to see that on camera. And I know I've talked too much already, man.
Hey, no, that's all right. No, I'm one of those people that will listen to 2 hours worth of info and get about as geeky as you can get about it. But no, that's awesome. Guys, if you want to check out any more about a lot of those sponsors that he mentioned, I'll make sure I put some links in the show notes for them as well. And how about just your stuff, David? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. It's pretty. I'm Duo Realis on Instagram. Probably if you look David Swendseid up, I'll come up. And then there's Apex _ Apex Pro David. There's that Instagram as well. On Facebook, if you put in David Swendseid, I come up on Facebook. There's also an Apex branch to that too. But listen, if I can help out you guys, I do get busy for sure. But if you do get on my Facebook, whatever you do, like the post or whatever they ask you to do, and you message me, just tell me who you are, what you're looking for, what's going on, who you're with. And if there's anything that I can help you with as far as questions, whether it's angling performance or baits or whatever, I'll do the best I can for sure.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks so much for coming on, David. It's I love your enthusiasm and the heart is totally there and you wear it on your sleeve. And I love that about you because, I've been accused of the same thing myself. So it's a kindred spirit for sure. So again, thanks so much for coming on. Guys, I'm going to tease this a little bit, but I'm hoping to have some stuff that I can potentially give out to you. So we're going to work on that. So stay tuned for that. We'll see what we can do. But I'm definitely looking forward to trying these soft plastics a little bit. The Ned Rig one specifically looks right up my alley. We will go. We'll see where we go from there. But again, thank you so much for coming on, David. I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, thank you. You guys take care out there and keep this show going. You guys are doing an awesome job for sure.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. All right. Well, guys, this has been the Bass Fishing for Noobs podcast, where we bring you the techniques, the tricks, and the tips to help you rip more lips. Be sure to tune in next time. Have a good night, guys.